Hi there, this is Imaneo. Welcome to my channel. And as you know, in this series, we are implementing a game using Flutter and Flame game engine. It is called Flappy Dash. And in this episode, we are going to implement the leaderboard. So let's get started. As you remember, in the previous episode, we just implemented these components. So for example, if you click here, you see a list of players with the scores. And we just implemented the UI. So as you know, these are just some temp data, and for example, this is the user's score, and when you click on it, you see a rename dialog or rename pop-up. And when you click the save, we are gonna save it to the backend that we have. Okay, so I have the Nakama installed on my server and I've put it behind a domain. It is called console.flappydash.com, and for the APIs, we have api.flappydash.com. So I just separated the domain for the console and the domain for the APIs. And for example, here we have access to the ports that are for the Nakama client. And let's copy it, and in the code base, I'm gonna find it. I think it was inside the block that we have. Yeah, so instead of the IP, I can just copy paste this URL, api.flappydash.com, and I'm gonna set SSL to true because I support SSL in this domain. And for the server key, I'm gonna use an environment variable. So this is something that I provide it when I want to run the project. For example, as you see here, we have an additional argument which is Dart define, and I just created this environment variable which is the Nakama server key, and I'm gonna put the real one here. So this way we are able to pass the secure server key to the application that we have instead of hard coding it here. Okay, so let's run the app to see whether it works or not. As you remember, we have some temp code to create the session and also create a group. And let me run the game and open the logs. We have some errors. Let me kill the game and run it again. Maybe it solves the issue. Okay, so it seems we could get the session. I mean, the connection was okay, but here we have unexpected null value. Where is this? It's inside here. Okay, there's a problem when it wanted to create the group. I don't know what's the issue, but that's fine because we don't need to have the group feature at the moment. Let me remove it. The point is that we just need to get the information about the leaderboard that we have. So I have a custom script that created this leaderboard. It is main leaderboard, and the authoritative is false. It means that the clients can edit the records in the leaderboard. If you set it to true, only backend is allowed to rewrite or change the records in the leaderboard. But for now it is false. It means that we have less security, but it is simpler and the client can update the score in the leaderboard. So let's get the leaderboard here. For example, we can say client leaderboard records, list leaderboard records. And the session is session that we have. And we have the leaderboard name, which is this one that I just copied. And if I print it here, for example, we can get the list here, and I can just print the list that we have. Yes, so let's see. Okay, it could get the leaderboard records. We have some records. For example, this user has this score, or the other one with this username has this score. And by the way, we have an error and I'm not sure where it comes from, but I can just ignore it for now. Later I can solve it. But the point is that we could retrieve the scores. And if you take a look here, you see that it's a leaderboard record list. So I'm gonna define the type here, and here we have the cursor for the pagination, and we have the owner records. For example, it returns the scores that are for the user that is calling this API. And for example, here you will have access to the list of records. And here, for example, you have created at, expiry time, leaderboard ID, owner ID, rank, and a score, and more. Yeah, so to do that, we need to move this logic to a data source that we have, because at the moment it is inside the qubit, and as we remember, we are following the very good ventures architecture. It's here, and as you remember, we have the presentation layer or application layer, we have domain layer and the data layer. So I'm just going to create some classes for the data layer that connects to the backend, and then we have the repository as a middle layer. Then we are able to retrieve the data and show it in the presentation layer. So let's create the data layer. I'm gonna create data, and I'm gonna create a remote directory because we are gonna have both remote and local, but for now I'm just going to have the remote data source that we have, and I can just create Nakama data source dart, and we have Nakama data source. Yeah, so let's copy paste the code that we have here, and I'm just going to remove this logic from here. And inside the Nakama, I'm just going to paste it here. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep this one here because it is something that is shared between all the functions that we have, and I'm gonna add this to the dictionary. And yeah, so for example, I'm gonna have a future of session that is init session, and here we have device ID, and we are just going to copy paste this code, and it's gonna be async. Yeah, so this way we are authenticating the user, and we just return the session, and here we can store the session inside the class that we have. So what is the type of session? Yeah, it's session. We can have session current session, and it can be a late variable because it's not initialized in the constructor, it is in the init session, and we can just return it in the function. And yeah, so now we can have a future of leaderboard record list to retrieve leaderboard. So here we just copy paste this logic. Yeah, so it's gonna be an async function, and it calls the list leaderboard records, and we can accept a leaderboard name. Yeah, and the default value is this one. And for the session, we can just return the current session. And now we can return the list that we have. Okay, so this way we are able to show the leaderboard. To initialize a session, we need to have the device ID, and I have prepared a logic to get the device ID. I'm gonna create a new directory for local, and here I'm gonna have the device data source, and I'm gonna copy paste the code that we have. Yes, so we are using Android ID package, device info plus, and also UUID, and also shared preferences. So let me import the packages, and then I will explain you the logic. Flutter pub add. Okay, so we imported all the classes, and now the issues are gone. Yeah, so to explain that, we are using the device info to retrieve the identifier for the iOS. So this is the device ID that we have for iOS. And we are gonna use Android ID for the platform of Android, and if it is not available, we are gonna create a new UUID for the Android. And if it is a platform rather than iOS and Android, for example, when we are on the web, we are gonna create a new device ID based on a random UUID string. And by the way, it is something like this, for example. And then we store it in the shared preferences. And then next time you call it, we just try to read it from the device. And if it doesn't exist, we are gonna generate it or get the device ID from the platform and write it to the device. So basically we have three functions here: read device ID, write device ID, and also get device ID. So this is the one that we are gonna call from outside. We can make it private because we are not going to call it from outside. And this function tries to load the device ID from the shared preferences, and if it doesn't exist, it creates a new one. And on top of that, we are gonna have the domain layer. So inside that, we are gonna have repositories. And for example, we can have a game repository, which is a class of game repository, and it has access to both data sources that we have here, for example, Nakama and the device data source, and it just connects these two together. For example, gets the device ID from here and passes it to the Nakama data source. So let's implement the function. At first, let's have some properties here. For example, Nakama data source and device data source. So I'm gonna get them from the constructor, and we are gonna have a future of session to init session. And at first we are gonna get the device ID from device data source, and then we are gonna call the Nakama data source dot init session. So as a device ID, we are gonna pass it here, and then we can return the session. Okay, so it just gets the device ID from device data source and passes it to the Nakama. So this way, our repository is able to work with different kind of data sources and combine them together. By the way, we have a typo here, init. Okay, so let's create the other one, which is future of leaderboard record list to get leaderboard. And it's gonna be an async. And we are gonna call nakama.retrieve leaderboard, and we can just return it. By the way, let's rename it to have the same name here. And yeah, so we have a function that calls another function, so it is simple for now. But for example, later, if you want to support offline fares, you can just store them in the local storage and return them from here if the internet is not available. So this is the responsibility of the repository. So it decides to use the different data sources that it has. And yeah, so we have another function which is submit a score, and it's gonna have a score, and we are gonna call Nakama data source dot submit a score. And here, let us implement the method here in the Nakama. So we can just use the client to call the write leaderboard record, and as you see, we need to have the session, so we can use this one. And we have the leaderboard name, so we need to get the leaderboard name in the method here. We can just copy paste it here, and by the way, we can just make it required, then we can set it optional in the repository or somewhere else to keep the consistency. And yeah, so what does it return? It returns a leaderboard record, so we can just expose the record that we have from here. Okay, so now we can submit the score here, and also we need to have the leaderboard name, and we can just pass the score and leaderboard name. Why it doesn't work? Submit a score. Oh, sorry, it is the device data source, so we need to use Nakama data source. Yeah, and here we just submit it, and then we can expose the leaderboard record to the function response. And also, to simplify them, we can just make them single line. So we can just remove this part of code and just call the function, and we can do the same here. You know, it makes it simpler. And yeah, so we just need to call game repository.init session, and then we can call these functions to get the leaderboard. Okay, so at this point, we need to add a new page that is the splash page, and we show it whenever the web loads, and we just need to run the init session inside the splash that we have. So I'm gonna create a new page here called splash, and inside that I'm gonna create a new file called splash page. And to speed up the process, I'm gonna copy paste some code that I already wrote. So for example, this is the splash page that we have. I'm gonna explain it to you. and then we have splash qubit and the splash state. So I'm gonna create a new directory called qubit, and now I'm going to copy paste the state and qubit that we have here. Okay, so the state has is loading and open home page. So this is the simple state that we have for the splash qubit. And here we have the game repository, and I'm going to import it from somewhere else. And yeah, so the logic is very simple. We have the splash qubit, it has access to the game repository that we already implemented the function inside it, and we have the splash duration, so it is 2 seconds. For example, we can change it to 5 seconds or something else. And we have the open page function that is exposed to the outside, it is not private. And for example, when the splash page opens, we can call this in the init state or somewhere else. And we have the start time and the end time, and we have the difference, and if we waited less than the splash duration, we wait more to have the 2 seconds delay. Otherwise, we open the home page. So this is how it works. And as a logic, we have the game repository.init session. So as you remember, this is the logic that we implemented. It just initializes the session in the Nakama. And in the open home page, we have this logic. So we have a flag that is for open home page, and we set it true, and then we set it false. So this is because if we don't revert it to false, if we have another set state, the page that is listening to this flag opens the home page again. So that's why we need to set it back to false. It's like a side effect that we have in our qubit. So we just need to notify once, not for all the time. And yeah, in the home page, I'm gonna remove this one, and I'm gonna import it, and I'm gonna add the main page. And yeah, so let me explain you how it works. We have the splash page, and we just provided the game repository. By the way, this is the dependency injection that we have. So we injected the repository in the constructor, and then we need to inject the data sources in the repository constructor, and so on and so forth. And as a child, we have a splash page content, which is here. And when the game opens for the first time, init state calls, and we just call the splash qubit.onPageOpen. So this way we can initialize the logic that we have. And inside the block consumer, we have listener and also the builder. In the listener, we said if open home page is true, just open the main page that we have. So it just pushes the main page to the stack that we have. And in the builder, we have a scaffold, and in the center, we have the dash image. So let's check whether we have it inside the images or not. Yes, we have dash.png, and also we have a text called Flappy Dash with the text style of this color. And yeah, so we just need to open the splash page instead of main page by default. Let me find the main.start. Yes, it's here. We just need to open the splash page instead of the main page. And we need to wire up the dependency injection that we have. For example, as you remember, we have a service locator that we define what we have here. And here I'm gonna define the data sources, and here I'm gonna define the repositories. For the data sources, we can just register them like here. We can import them. Yeah, so we just registered them as a lazy singleton. So whenever you call getit.get Nakama data source, it just returns the same instance that it has, it's singleton. And we have the same for the device data source. And for the repository, we have this one that registers the game repository, and in the constructor, it returns the device data source and also the Nakama data source. So it is how the dependency injection works in our project. We just inject the data sources in the constructor of the repository, and then we just inject the repository to the qubit that we have here. As you remember, in the constructor of our qubit, we have repository, and it is injected using this code. So it gets the game repository from the getit package, and it is singleton. So let me run the game. Okay, as you see, we have the splash page, but we have some error inside the device data source. We said if platform is iOS. By the way, we can just check if K is web or k is wasm to generate it like this, and otherwise check if it is iOS, because I think this code is not valid in web environment. So let me run it again. Yes, so as you see, it works well. To make sure that we are good, I can just print the session that we have in the game repository. So I'm just going to print everything is good and session.token. So this way we can make sure that everything is working well. So as you see, we have the token here and it seems everything is working correctly. Let's remove it. And now we can just load the leaderboard that we have. So for example, in our game qubit, it's here. We can have the leaderboard state here. So we can just create the leaderboard record list, which is, for example, top 20 records. We are not gonna have pagination here at the moment. And yeah, so to implement it in a better way, I would like to create a new class for the leaderboard and then map the Nakama leaderboard to the leaderboard entity that we have in the domain. So this way we are not dependent to the data source that we have to the Nakama. But for now, that's fine. We just want to learn something. But in the perfect situation, I would like to use entity that we have in our project, not the leaderboard record list that we have from the Nakama. Because this way we are dependent, highly dependent to the Nakama. And yeah, so I'm gonna define it here. By the way, let's make it nullable, and we can have leaderboard here, and then we can do this here. And yeah, it can be a list of nullable objects. And yeah, so now we can just load the leaderboard and put it inside the game state that we have. Then we are able to show it here. So let me open the game qubit and we can have access to the game repository here. So it's gonna be in the constructor, and for example, in the constructor, we can have a init function. It is private. And we can just say game repository dot get leaderboard. And yeah, so here we can just make it optional. What was the name of leaderboard? It is main leaderboard. And we can do the same for the submit score. Yeah, so this way we have the optional leaderboard name, and here we can just call get leaderboard. Then we can emit a new state, and we can just set the leaderboard record list to this one. So this way we can update the leaderboard whenever the game qubit is created. And the point is that we have a problem here. So as we call it in the constructor, it might get called before the initialization that we have for the session. So if you check in the game repository, we have init session and we have these functions. So we have to make sure that this function is getting called first, and then we have these functions. So to solve this issue, I'm gonna have a completer here. And by the way, it is something that waits until something is completed and notifies others. So it can be a void, and we can name it init completer, initialization completer, and it can be a completer. Okay. And when we are done with the completion, we can call complete, and we can put it inside the try catch. And here we can say initializer dot error, complete error. And for example, we can just rethrow the error that we have here. And here we can just move this code here. Yeah, so basically we have a completer that completes whenever the initialization is called and it is finished. And now here we can just make it async, and before that we need to make sure that it is completed. So we need to do this, and it waits until the completer is completed, and then we can return the leaderboard. And if we have some errors here, for example, if the error happened here, it throws an error here. So the function doesn't continue, it just stops here. And we can do the same here. So it's an async function and we need to wait for the initialization. Yeah, for example, when you accidentally call submit a score before the init session, it just waits until you initialize the session. And yeah, so we have an error here. We need to inject the game repository in the game qubit. So we need to do the same. Just change the generic time to game repository. Yes, so let me add some print statements here. Yeah, so let me run the game. Yes, we just got the print statement. It said that leaderboard retrieved with 5 items. And now we are able to show them inside the leaderboard that we have here. So let me find it, leaderboard dialog. And as you remember, here we have a list of items. And yes, we can just wrap it with the block builder. And in the generic, we can provide the game qubit and game state. And also in the builder, we have context and also the state. So here, instead of item count, I can provide the state.leaderboard_list.records.length. Otherwise, it is 0. So this way we are able to set the count of the records, and if it is null, it returns 0. And now we can just set the rank using, by the way, let's get the item leaderboard list.records. And here we can just make it non-nullable, because when we are in the builder callback, we are pretty sure that this list is not null. And we have the records and we can get it from the index. And yeah, so this is the record that we have. We can have the rank here. Is it nullable? Yes. Otherwise, we can set a large number, and as a player name, we can just set rank dot. What do we have? We have owner ID and also username. So at first we try to get the username, otherwise load the owner ID. Otherwise, return an empty string. And the score is record.score, otherwise 0. And isMine is for whenever the owner ID is equals to the user ID that we have. So for example, I can just make it something random. Yeah, so let me run the game. If we open the pop-up, yes, you see that we have the scores. So these are the real scores that we have in the game. By the way, these are some random generated IDs. And now let's fix this logic. So we need to return isMine true whenever it is for the user that is calling the API. To do that, we can add a new property in the game state, and we can add final string current user ID. So this is the user ID for the current user, and it is empty by default. So we are gonna have it here, here, and also here. So we can set it whenever we open the game somewhere, for example, in the game qubit. And in the init, we are gonna call final current user ID. We are gonna get it from the game repository, and the game repository is gonna get it from the data source. So I'm gonna write it here, and we are gonna call get user ID, current user ID. And we should make sure that it is initialized. And here, let's create a new method. Oh, okay, so it is not a leaderboard record list, it's just a string, and it's a string. So in the current session, I think we have user ID. Yes, so we can just return this one directly. And yeah, it is not a future, it is a sync call. So we just return the string. And here we get the current user ID, and here we set the current user ID that we have in the qubit. So this way, in our dialog, we can check if record.ownerID is equals to state.current user ID. So it says that if the ID of the record is equals to the ID of me, so it means that it is mine. And let me run it again. And yeah, so none of them is for the current user ID because it is a new user. So we can just submit a score and to see it here. So to submit the score, as you remember in the game qubit, we have a function, yes, increase score. So we can just submit the score whenever you increase your score, or you can do it in the game over. So I think it is more safe to call it here because it is once in a session. So I'm just going to call game repository submit a score and state.current score. So this way we just submit the score to the backend. And let me run again. And let's play. I'm gonna play until 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the score should be submitted, and if we run the game again, it reloads the scores, and if you click, yes, you see that we have a new score. Where is that? There's a new score, but it is not ours. So what is happening? And in the next step, we need to implement the functionality to update the username. So we just need to write something here, and when we click save, we have to save the new name. And to do that, I'm gonna find it in the nickname dialog. Yes, when you press the save button, we can just return the text that is entered. And to do that, I'm gonna change it to a stateful widget, and we have text controller, and it's gonna be a late variable, and in the init state, I'm gonna initialize it. So it's a simple text controller. Yeah, and here in the dispose, we need to dispose it. Okay, so we need to pass it in the text field that we have. So controller is this one, and it's not const anymore. And the point is that we need to set the default text here. For example, we can set the current user name here, and to retrieve that, we can have the context.read, and this way we are able to get access to the game qubit. And we can say state.currentaccount.user.username. And because it is nullable, we are gonna have something like this. And we just need to provide it here. And yeah, so if we have the username, it's gonna be here. Otherwise, it's an empty string. And when we press the save here, we are gonna write navigator.off.pop. So here we are gonna return the text that is entered. So it's gonna be a text. And by the way, we can make it a single line. And yeah, so now we are able to get the result of this dialog or pop-up, and the response type is a string. By the way, it is nullable. And here I'm gonna change the logic to something else. So we await for the result, and we check if result is not null and result is not empty. We can just call gameQubit.change username or something like that. And gameQubit can be retrieved from the context.read, and here we can get the gameQubit, and result is the new username that we have. Let's create the method here. and we can have game repository dot change username. Okay, and let's create the method inside the repository. We have Nakama data source dot change username, and inside that we pass the new username. Let's create the method, and here we can just use client to update. Yeah, we have update account, and inside that we have, we need to pass the session for sure, and we have display name and also the username. So we are gonna update the username, and yeah, so this way we are able to update the new username. So let's run again to see how it works. Yeah, as you see, we have the pre-filled username here, and I can just change it to Imaneo2. And if I save it, and because we don't refresh the leaderboard automatically, we need to run it again. And yeah, so I think we need to refresh the leaderboard. It is not refreshed, I think. Let's open the leaderboard dialog here, and let's change it to a stateful. And inside the init state, I'm gonna use context.read, and I'm gonna use GameQubit, and I'm gonna say refresh leaderboard. And this way we can refresh the leaderboard whenever we open it. So game repository, get leaderboard. And yeah, so it is something that we already have it here. So we can create a function, for example, void update leaderboard. And inside that we can copy this code and also this code. And now we can reuse the code here. So it can be a future of void, and it can be await. Yeah, so now we are able to reuse it here in the refresh leaderboard. And whenever we open the leaderboard, it just refreshes the leaderboard. Let's see. It's weird, it is not updated. So what is happening? We just get the leaderboard. So let's print the leaderboard here, and we can map the records to usernames to see what is the usernames. Yeah, it is Imaneo without number 2. So let's submit a new score. I think we need to update the record that we have in the database. So for example, let's have the score 3 and let's run it again. Let's check the accounts that we have. Yeah, the username is Imaneo2 here. It's weird that in our app it is Imaneo without the number 2. By the way, we can just write the username here instead of my profile to make sure that we are updating it. Yes, it is here, and we can just wrap it with the block builder, and it's gonna be a game qubit. And here we can say state dot current user account dot user dot username, otherwise my profile. So let's run it again. Yeah, so it is Imaneo2, but the score is not updated. Let's check the leaderboard that we have. Here we have the records, and here we have the username that is not updated. I think it doesn't update the username automatically. So as you see, it is recorded here. And what if we delete it and submit it again? So let's see. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and let me open it. Yes, now we have the Iman Neo 2. Yeah, so I just realized that it doesn't update the username automatically. I mean, it makes sense. So I think we are misusing the username. It should be something that user choose when the account is created or something else. And we need to use the display name to use it here in the leaderboard, not the username. So username is like something that doesn't change when the user creates the account. And yeah, so you see that we have a display name concept here. We need to use it instead of the username to show it here. And let me check in the leaderboard dialog to see, can we show the score display name? Here we have record and record dot display name. So we don't have the display name here. Yeah, so it seems we don't have the display name here, and we need to call the get account for the users that we have here to be able to get the display name. And because this episode is getting longer and longer, I'm gonna stop this video, but I'm gonna fix it by myself. So I'm gonna commit the changes so far, and then I'm gonna add a new commit that I use display name instead of the username here. So you can just check the commit, or maybe in the next episode we can check the commit to see how we handle it. And yeah, so hopefully when you are watching this video, I fixed the issue and you can just play with the game and update your display name, not the username. And then I can see the leaderboard scores, or maybe in the next video, we can just check the scores of the users that we have in the leaderboard and see who has the highest score. And yeah, so thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe the channel, and stay tuned for the next video. Bye.